Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Logistics Executive TV. Today, we've got a market update in Australia, and I want to introduce our three other panel members for today. I'm joined here by Cassandra Lee, our Head of Executive Search, our Global Partner for Executive Search based in Brisbane. Cassandra, how are you going?
Hi, Kim. How are you? Good day.
And it's good to see you. We have Sal Milici, the General Manager for Trade and Policy Operations for the FTA, Freight and Trade Alliance, and the APSA, which is the Australian Peak Shippers Association. Sal, how are you doing?
Yeah, good, Kim. Good, Cassandra. Thanks for having us on. And Tom, always good to see you.
Good stuff. And we've got Tom Jensen as well, who's Head of International Freight and Logistics for FTA and APSA. Cass, you want to take it away? I think there's been some big events in Australia in the last few days, and we want to drill down on that in a short update.
There has been. We just had the federal budget released on Tuesday night. So there's, lots of interesting news coming out of there and some big implications for the industry. So, Sal, do you want to give us a bit of a heads up? What are, a couple of the key takeaways that have come out of the budget?
Yeah, thanks, Cassandra. Quite a few things. Probably the big ones around biosecurity. So I'll leave that one to last as sort of the big finale. A really interesting one is the tax office is getting about $500 million in funding to increase the GST compliance. So I think anyone who's not doing the right thing on their GST reporting would take heed of that. The ATO looks like they're going to be funded to really get on top of that. For exporters, the Austrade are being defunded of the Export Market Development Grants Program. It's about $61 million that was in the budget. So no funding that was already committed or any applications currently under assessment will be impacted, but going forward, that program is being ceased. We're told the savings from that will be redirected to fund other government policy priorities in that DFAT portfolio. Speaking of DFAT, a really interesting one is they've got $4 million to review policy options to reduce carbon leakage, and that includes possibly the introduction of a Australian carbon border adjustment mechanism. So that's another way of saying if imports coming in from overseas haven't had sort of a carbon price put onto it, it would be adjusted potentially at the border. Simplified trade system gets another $24 million to keep working on that and just making things easier for importers and exporters to access the border. The big news, though, was sustainable funding for biosecurity. That was an election commitment by the newish Albanese government. I think they've been in power about a year now. To give a bit of context, I've been with FTA just on 3 years now, and without question, the top issue that gets raised or has been raised with me in Australia has been ongoing delays in relation to biosecurity delays, both documentary-wise at the border and also inspections.
Hey, just a quick one, Sal, sorry if I can jump in, Cass. Tom, Sal mentioned a couple of organisations our audience internationally may not recognise. That was DFAT and Austrade. What are they, Tom?
Yeah, so DFAT's the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So basically they look after a lot of the foreign affairs implementation of the regulations there. And Austrade are basically the governing body that help a lot of the importers and exporters around the country to make sure things get around the world.
So then what's the real impact, to Australian organisations or Australian New Zealand organisations exporting? Is it a win or is it a loss?
Yeah, well, I think that Export Market Development Grant is a potential loss. That was money that was being granted to exporters to help them access overseas markets. So, hopefully it's still kept in that space and reinvested in other ways that support Australian exporters. But just to finish off with biosecurity, they've basically got about $1 billion extra in additional funding, which is definitely overdue. It appears from where we sit that they were sort of underfunded for quite a long time. I think probably just to finish off, what's really interesting is that low-value goods will be cost recovered for the first time. So e-commerce shipments under $1,000 will have a small amount, maybe 40 cents per package. It starts on the 1st of July 2024. Previously, that wasn't cost recovered.
Yeah. Okay. And then, from an export perspective for the Australian market, with a larger food bowl, right? So we've just got this huge opportunity. So for organisations from a freight perspective, with the biosecurity funding, how is that going to benefit Australian companies exporting? Or does it?
Tom, what we hear...
Yeah,
go Tom.
Yeah, I was going to say, you might have seen the president of the Farmers Association on TV. She wasn't too happy with the government for the budget.
Not at all.
So basically they are basically introducing a few extra fees on the import side, but at the same time, it hasn't really helped the mums and dads buying the groceries. But largely all in all, it's a budget that we sort of. It's really one that was hard to swallow, but for the exporters. But on the import side, it's increasing the biosecurity to make it better in the long run for exporters as well.
Yeah. So there's some wins and some losses into it. It's going to be interesting to sort of see how this plays out. So, it might be the perfect sort of catalyst to have another conversation in about a month's time when we really start to resonate with what the fine print is, what it means for the industry, like how this is actually going to permeate and given the macroeconomic environment that we're all in, how it's actually going to affect the Australian exporters as well as the importers and who's winning and who's actually going to lose.
Yeah, so I think you make a really good point. Sorry, just to say that these are budget announcements, but how they are then converted into on-the-ground actions is interesting and remains to be seen.
Exactly. Hey, I just wanted to throw quickly, guys, back to that issue of e-commerce, taxing e-commerce shipments, because globally, all around the world and all the markets we operate in, many of our customers, it's of course, the government's been trying to find a mechanism whereby local retailers can compete with e-commerce, which is just cross-border and no tax. So that's a big one, Osal.
Yeah, and we don't like to look into our crystal ball too much, but biosecurity have put this on the agenda, and there's a good chance that Customs or Australian Border Force would probably follow them down that path and say, well, we're not cost recovering any of our activities against these low value goods. And our friends at Biosecurity have done it. We'll do the same.
Flip the ticket.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So FTA and APSA, your representative, your advocacy organisation, the peak advocacy organisation in Australia, representing exporters, representing freight carriers, but particularly a lot of primary exporters as well. Very impressive subscriber list there of several hundred major organisations. Quickly, as we wrap up, what would be maybe, Tom, one or two of the really big issues? I see you guys on TV and also on LinkedIn a lot with your representation advocacy with the federal government in Canberra and in the various states where you're all located. What are some of the really big issues that you're trying to push from an advocacy point of view for the exporters at the moment in Australia?
Yeah, probably the burning one was we called for a review by the Productivity Commission, which they did last year into Australia's maritime system around things like terminal access charges and empty container detention fees. Basically, we're asking for some reform in that area. The Productivity Commission put out a fantastic report making a lot of suggestions for reform in that area, but that's now sitting with government. So now it's, I guess it's up to the government to enact some of those or all of those recommendations.
And that meeting was just last week, wasn't it, that the report was heading down and there was another meeting about what the findings were and what needs to be done and how it's a year low or something?
No, from memory, the draft was late last year and the final report was handed to government early this year. So it sits with the Treasurer and, he's obviously been pretty busy putting the budget together, but it's been with government for quite some time now.
Okay. Be interesting to see what comes out of that, yeah.
So quick one, just on the broader picture on the economy in Australia for the budget, then the first surplus announced for 15 years, is that right? In the budget of Australia, even though the country owes $1 trillion, somehow they've got a surplus, is that right?
Yeah, basically, I think the Liberals actually said talked about a surplus a few years ago, but it didn't end up being a surplus. So we'll wait and see. Maybe the Labor have done the same, but Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
All right, good stuff. Okay, so Sal Milici, the GM for Trade and Policy Operations for FDA, Freight and Trade Alliance, and the Australian Peak Shippers Association, and of course Tom Jensen. Both of you working very, very hard for Australian shippers, Australian exporters, manufacturers, producers. Cass, any final questions for these chaps before we let them go? Because I'm going to ask where we can get hold of you, where any organisations or individuals who want to contact you and become part of your organisations. We'll talk to that in a second. But Cass, any final questions from you?
So, like, Tom, what's the one big thing that we're working on now with the association members to expand their exports? What's the key advocacy issue that you're working on?
There's a few on the go, actually. We're looking at security reforms. They're trying to deregulate a bit of the security processes around. So that's one of them. The exporters in general, I guess they're very rate driven as well. So with the rates going up and down, they're finally going up on the import side, but they've been bottomed out for a while. So we're expecting a few increases on the import side. But the exporters, I mean, at the end of the day, they'll get their dues as well. Their freight prices will come down a bit because there's a few more options now on air. A few more airlines now come into the market, such as United Airlines.
Okay, so we've got a bit of good news on the horizon for them.
Yeah, yep.
Good to hear.
So if anything you're working on, Sal, anything yourself and Paul, of course, Paul, your CEO, who we've interviewed before, any major issues that are burning at a federal level?
It's that productivity commission and just getting government to act on that one. That's the big one. I'd encourage your viewers to look into that productivity commission review on Australia's maritime system and its recommendations. And that kind of encapsulates everything that we're advocating on behalf of our members.
So productivity commission, I recall from many years ago being in Australia, is an independent body, is that right? And they sort of like there to hold the government accountable for what they're doing and what the policies are doing?
It's part of it's a government agency, I guess, and quite often when government has a problem that they don't know how to manage, they task the Productivity Commission with doing a review into whatever the problem is and providing them with a report and recommendations.
Okay, brilliant. Hey, folks, Cass, thank you for giving us some time I'm not sure where you are. You're in Sydney today. Sal and Tom, thanks so much for joining us. So if folks want to be in touch with the FTA or APSA, where can they get hold of you?
Probably LinkedIn's the best place to find me. Do a search on Sal Milici or Freight and Trade Alliance, and you'll find me there. Or just our website has all our contact details. ftalliance.com.au.
Okay, brilliant. I'm pretty sure we can see that up here as well. Brilliant. So Sal, Tom and Cassandra, thanks so much for joining us. Really look forward to further updates to see how things are going in Australia. Australia, of course, as you were saying earlier, Cass, a great food bowl for the world, really. Massive, massive production and output of all sorts of food and produce. And there's massive amount of activity going on politically, geopolitically as well in terms of major markets, and those things are evolving as we speak. So the next time we talk, I think we might have a review of those sorts of activities that are going on and how that's playing out for the industry in Australia. Cass, Sal, Tom, thanks very much again, and thanks everybody for joining us on Logistics Executive TV.